Hey, good afternoon, Nemo. Good to have you on board. How are you? Just getting ready to warm up a little bit here, and we're ready to start soon. So it's good to have you on board. And by the way, thank you very much for all the notations sending back and forth about some of the things you've been thinking about regarding the G12. It's been a lot of help and fun to see you get active with this thing. And I really appreciate the input. So once again, thank you very, very much. Hope you're well. Oh, you're welcome, Nemo. It's a lot of fun. We're going to put some pieces together in that G12 thing, and it's getting more and more intriguing as we go. But I think the interior side is going to be a really good stickler to work with. So I think we've got it down to a nice simplified form. It looks more like a G12 interior as opposed to a jet fighter. I mean, I started out with that route, and it was okay. But I think the latest is a variation with all very simplified screens and so forth. It's going to be much, much better. Yeah, you're right. It's going to be a lot of fun to get feedback on it. And we are definitely going to pursue a model as well. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun and put together a storyboard and some print work for sale and the like. So keep you posted. Hey, very good. Excellent. Hey, well, welcome to the Dream Labs. Dr. Contrast here. Looking forward to working with you guys today. And before I begin, I just want to make sure that make this announcement. I'm really, really interested in making up a lesson. I missed last Friday due to a travel plan and so forth, and I want to go back in today and pick up on some of the lesson plans that I missed out on Monday. Pardon me, on Monday that I missed because of a travel day. But I wanted to take today's Friday session to go back into some basic lesson stuff here and make sure we kind of keep the momentum going with some of the things that we're working with here. And today's whole format or stream is going to be built around getting into compound form, for example, but the heading is advanced perspective. Now, within that advanced perspective umbrella, there's an awful lot of information that has to be dealt with, for example, like distortion and foreshortening and the like, and how to begin to cheat a surface or a form. But I think the most important thing about advanced perspective, from my point of view, is a very simple thing called how to generate proper circles around forms in perspective. If you're like me early on, man, I wrestled like mad with very organic shapes and how they look like, what they begin to appear like, and how to begin to use the process to develop it. And I think one of the things I discovered was you have to understand the system first. What are the mechanics involved first? Then move into actually flattering it or moving it around here. So today, as you can see, I started out here with just laying down some of the very simple things we're going to work with. Go back a little bit of review on some perspective stuff here, information. But I laid down, for example, notation of horizon line and CVPs and central vanishing points. So I'm going to use that as a starting tool here. And as stated in the stream initially here, it's going to be part one. I want to really address for everybody's benefit here, especially mine, how critical it is to understand how to work with circles in perspective. And let me please start out with this commentary. They are not ellipses. Ellipses are a completely different geometric form. It is not as dynamic as a circle. It has never been part of that. It's a four-quadrant equalized curve that becomes very static. It's more rectangular than it's cubistic. And I want to go back to very simple truths to make sure you understand how to put the process together. So I got a note here from Captain Nemo. Looking forward to whatever you come up with. I just wanted to give you something to consider, but I have full trust in. Well, thanks very much, Nemo, and I have full trust in yours as well. So it's been a lot of fun interchanging ideas back and forth here. So let's look at a very simple set of circumstances here. We're going to start out today with going back in a little bit of a review. I'm going to start the number one, the most key element in developing this whole process of advancing the cause of perspective. We're getting into more compound form is the following. That circles are a product of working within the confines of the face of a cube. Now, it sounds like a boring statement to make, but that cube is critical because it begins to tell us how to set the mechanics up for future reference in doing round and very complicated shapes. So I'm going to start with a very simple sketch. Let's get this guy down here. Pardon me as I rotate the pad a little bit. Let's go back in and just begin. I'm going to put together a face of a cube. I'm going to go here, put that vertical in place, get that height right there, and knock that thing down and rotate it over. Find my width. There I am here. I'm going to take that line, move it uphill, and begin to develop the face of a cube. I'm going to connect those dots. There's my height. I'm going to come across and pick that up. Now, that's the face of a cube. Now, interesting things happen dynamically once you begin to move into that. Now we have that. First thing we want to do is, and again, follow with me here. There's a lot of little steps along the way, but hopefully along the way it'll become much clearer as to why this fundamental, the mechanics become so critical. Number one, let's find the center, perspective center. Let's drive that line through. Let's rotate this out just a bit, pardon my hands here, and rotate over. Now, what that helps us do is critically find the center, the perspective center of that cube, which is right there, or that face of that cube. That's critical. Now, the next thing we're going to do is this. We're going to add a horizontal line through it, parallel, and then we're going to go rotate, and then we're going to run a vertical line through it. And just for some distinction's sake here, let's do this. Let's make sure this is really, really healthy here. Now, this vertical line, let's put this in black. Let me see if I can redraw that. There's a vertical, which is very critical, and a horizontal, which is, again, very critical. This horizontal line is going to be known as a minor axis. That axis is minor. This one in the vertical will always be referred to as the major. And as we go through the process here, you begin to see why those two elements are so critical. The minor axis always has a habit in two-point perspective of going back to vanishing point right or left. And we're going to show you some demonstration work here in a moment as to how that begins to function. And the major axis, and oddly enough, in perspective, for example, in two-point perspective, the major axis always falls vertically if you're running on a vertical surface. Now, the minute you lay it down on the ground plane or on the floor or the top, that major axis rotates back to either vanishing point right or vanishing point left. I'll describe that in a moment here as we go through the sketches. Let's do a simple example here. Let's do a one-point perspective. Now I'm going to take this thing and begin to generate this whole process around the major axis and the minor axis. Now this is going to be a critical point. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those 4 points where they intersect the face of that cube are going to become critical. They're going to become my contact points. And what I'm going to do is from the shoulder, and again, rotating counterclockwise if I'm right-handed, and rotating clockwise if I'm left-handed, do the following. I'm going to rotate in, and then see it, and then strike it. And lay that circle right in place. Here's how I'm going to use those contact points. That develops a circle in no perspective. It's just a flat elevation. Now watch what happens when you start to move into perspective. Now keep in mind that the keys to success are understanding what the major axis does, which is vertical in most cases, and horizontal when on the ground plane or on the upper or lower, and I'll describe that very shortly here. Secondly, the minor axis always will go back to vanishing point right or left, but in one-point perspective, it remains parallel on the horizon line, and we'll show you that as we go here. So again, pardon me for all the diatribe here. I want to be certain that I'm communicating very clearly how critical it is to understand what the mechanics do. Once that's done, we'll show you, for example, in part 2 next week, we'll start looking at this thing and putting shape together and form and see how it all begins to function. Today's lesson or stream is going to be getting the mechanics out of the way so we know what the vocabulary is and how to work with it. So let's go back in through here and let's generate from that axis again, major axis vertical, minor axis horizontal, contact points on those 4 intersections, and then rotating that circle within that pure elevation of the face of that cube. Now, let's do this. I'm going to rotate the pad here. Let's go back in and create from the central vanishing point a drive line and a drive line. We're going to call this a one-point perspective. Now I'm going to come back in and pick a spot here, and you're going to notice something here from past experiences here. Now, this is a ground plane, for example, in this one-point perspective of the bottom of the cube. Remember the exercise we did where we actually split this, bisect that form down below at 45 degrees in the inside cut line piece? This is what we're going to utilize here today. There's my 45. I'm going to trisect it, go 1 and 2, and then drive that right back to horizon line, which is going to be a point of reference right there. Man, I guessed that pretty good. There it is. That's how the depth is going to be established in this whole piece. Now, let's go back and do this. Let's find that perspective center. It's going to do this. There's my location right there. That's my perspective center on that one-point face. So far, so good, gang. Coming along okay? Let me know any given time if I'm not communicating clearly or if I need to slow down a little bit, please let me know. I do not want to be the author of confusion here. I want to be certain that we understand, again, this whole critical idea of the mechanics of putting together advanced perspective, developing circles, which will lead us on to bigger and better things. So far, so good. Hey, thanks, Nemo. So here we go. There we are. Now I'm going to lay in the minor axis. Let's do this. Just change the pen color so we keep it all consistent. The minor axis is going to go through here. Notice, in this face right here, that minor axis now that I just illustrated, pardon me here, is always going to be parallel to the horizon line, because there's no static here at all. It just remains very flush. Next thing is I'm going to put in the major axis. I'm going to rotate the pad. Notice that major axis is going to go right back to central vanishing point. So here is my major axis back to central vanishing point, which is where I'm standing. Then I'm going to pick up that point, that point, that point, and that point. And I'm going to generate that circle in here and show you how this begins to function. Let's get the red pen back in place. Notice again, rotation from the shoulder. I'm going to run counterclockwise to get that form to be nice and fluid. If you try going the other way, try locking your wrist. It locks your wrist at a certain point, and man, you're in trouble. So from the shoulder, always generate, in this case, clockwise, because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, counterclockwise. Pardon me, counterclockwise. Here we go. Ready? Here it is. I'm going to rotate, see it, and drive it in there. Now look how fluid that gets. Is that cool or what? That's how to lay that beauty in there. Now you might miss a couple points here and there, but nonetheless, look at how that whole process opens that beauty up and begins to settle that circle right down on the paper here. So there's a good example of what takes place in a one-point perspective. Let's go through that again. Let's pick another point of reference here. I'm going to draw a drive line out and another drive line out. We'll just kind of go through some exercises here to see how this mechanics work. I'm going to come back in through here, pick up that face, and then here's my angle on the ground. So I'm going to come back in here again. Let's use this. Bisect it and then trisect it. Drive that line right back to the horizon line. And that's my special vanishing point. Now there's the back side of the cube. There's the face, very distorted one-point face of that cube. So there we are on the ground plane. Now we're going to come back in. I'm going to run along here and find out where my perspective center is. So I'm going to come back in through here, cross over. In this case, there's my perspective center. Beautifully done. There we are. Now I know where I am. Now, here's my minor axis, parallel to horizon line. Again, because I'm in a one-point perspective. Parallel to parallel. So far, so good. Now I'm going to rotate out here and pick up my major axis, which is now right back to central vanishing point. In one-point perspective, you'll always find that that major axis, whether it's on the floor or the top of a unit you're working with, will always go back to its central vanishing point. Again, because it's vertical. It's vertical, and in some cases, in one-point perspective, if you're working on the front face of something, it'll remain vertical. We'll show you that as we go down the line here as we go. All set? So here we are. Now, I'm going to pick up again. There's a point of reference, contact to contact to contact to contact. Now look how distorted that is. Now it's going to be kind of cool to lay in there. Now, same thing. Draw it in here, circle, run it through. And there's my circle laid right in there. It just falls right into place, knowing the geometry is secure. So we're getting those, and it's very scratchy, but it's very accurate at the same time. Visually accurate. So far, so good. Right, gang? There we are with some basic mechanics here. So let's go back in again. Now let's switch gears from one-point perspective and go to two-point perspective, which will now look like this. Let's go back in through here. Let's pick up, let's run this through. Let's get a leading edge, run that in place. Let's pick a height from there to there. Pick up a drive line. Pardon my hands here. Pick up a drive line. Get those frames in place. That helps me get all set up. There it is. And there it is. So there I am. There are my frames right there. I'm going to work with that piece. Now let's go back in again. Same process. We need to find, there's my angle. There's my split. There's my 1530. Drive that back up to that location right there. And there is my special vanishing point, which is right there. Now let's go back and do this. I'm going to come back and pick up this whole process. I'm going to get this face in place here. So I'm going to extend the ground line out. Take this and rotate it down that same height and drive that line right back to central vanishing point. And here I am. I'm going to pick that up. And there's my, in this case, the right-hand face of that cube. We're all set to go. Now at the same time, I'm going to come back in through here and draw a line through here. And again, pick up that intersection and draw it right back. So now, what I'm doing this, gang, is this. Here's the floor of this two-point cube. And here's the vertical face on the right-hand side. I'm going to use two systems here to develop what we're after here. Find this perspective center. in its perspective center. And there it is. Drive that line right back to vanishing point. There's my minor axis. And now here's my major axis. Contact, 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 contact. That's how I broke that surface down right there. That gave me the assurance to say, all right, now let's do this. Circle. Look how that falls right into place. If you're interested in looking how this begins to function, go out and look at your vehicle sometime and your automobile, and look at the front and rear tires. You'll notice that that tangent point always has to fall on that contact point on the ground because of the circle that the tires compose of. I'll show you maybe later on about how the distortion of this whole thing about ellipses can really fool you. And we might take care of that today, or I might illustrate that because of the complexity on the Tuesday stream. But I want you to be very careful how that contact point controls how that circle standing upright. You see some that are leaning, some that are tipping. That's because they've fallen in love with this whole lie about being an ellipse. It's not an ellipse. It's a circle in perspective, which is a completely different animal. So now let's go back to the floor system. Down on the floor plane, which is right here, this guy right here, down on the floor, I'm going to find its perspective center. Pardon me, all the lines. I'm going to draw through it, learning how to see. There's my perspective center right there. Minor axis. Right back to VP left in this right in this case. See it? There's my minor axis right there. Now major axis, right back to vanishing point left. Here's a good example that we've talked about in the opening conversation about how it's critical to know that when it's standing upright, the face is standing upright in 2-point perspective, that major axis runs vertical. But as the minute you lay it down, for example, notice how that just, if I drop that line over, it goes right back to vanishing point. This is still my major axis. It still falls true. Now we know that we have this contact, that, and that. And now let's put it in place. Circle. Very scratchy, but nonetheless, really lucid. Look how those two things fall right into place. They give you a pattern or a rhythm to work with that are just so vital. Let's isolate something here. So far, so good here, gang? What do you think, Captain Nemo? Making sense? There's a lot of information here. I want to be sure that we're really communicating well. It all comes down to understanding the keys to success, the majors, the minors, and how to work with the circle in a counterclockwise method, and how to begin to recognize where it goes to vanishing point, whether it stands vertical or goes back to right or left. Super. Very good. Thank you. Now, here we go. Another little exerciser. Let's go back to this central vanishing point here. Let's stretch this out. Let's create a frame. Let's pick up a vertical. And let's just visualize where that cube is going to be. There I am right there. There's the face of a cube. Much more streamlined. Now, let's go back in. Red pen. Find its center. Rotate. Find its center. Here I am right there. Notice that falls right on the horizon line, which is almost a 50-50 split. Sometimes you'll have that in perspective, and it's okay to deal with that. That's still good and clean. Now, let's go back in and create this whole thing. This now becomes my minor axis, and this now will become my major axis. There it is. Pardon me as I rotate out of this. Look at that. Contact, 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 contact. Now notice, again, I want to really stress something here very simple. This point right here on the ground line where that major axis hits is so critical, especially when you're doing transportation design. Hey, Ballistic, how are you, man? Good to see you. We're just going through some exercises here on some advanced perspective. I want to do just a real quick review here. I really felt bad about missing last Monday's session. I was called out of town on a business operation, and I wanted to go back into this advanced perspective. We're talking about how to generate compound form here, Ballistic, and doing circles and making sure that the authority is correct when we start to develop, especially when we start to do compound shape. It's really critical to understand how the mechanics work. And we're going to spend today learning how to put these pieces together so we can do accurate circles. And then on Tuesday, for example, next week, I'll take it a little further and we'll get into some complicated shapes and do some product work and show you how it all begins to function. So the key thing to remember is now, and again, this is a case where this face of this cube, by the way, Ballistic, everything we're doing here, good compound form is always built off the face of a cube. That's where we started. Then we put the major in place, which is vertical, minor horizontal, and moved into 1-point perspective to show how that works. Here's my major axis, there's my minor axis, all the way through, 1-point perspective again. Just did a 2-point exercise where it's the same system, but it all falls into place. Now we're going to finish this one up. This now is my major axis. This is now my minor axis. Now let's rotate that circle. And I'm right-handed, so I'm going to rotate from my shoulder and go counterclockwise. And I'm going to see it, and rotate it. And there it is. There's that circle in place. Once again, notice how this is so critical in terms of laying that thing in there. That point right there keeps that tire, or that circle, in this case, if it's transportation design, especially in transportation design. Man, I'm amazed. I do a lot of portfolio review work and so forth, and I'm just amazed at the number of individuals coming out of major transportation design schools that just don't have a grasp of how this whole thing begins to function. The wheels are falling off, they're tilting, it's distorted. Very rarely do you see it. So anyway, here we are. There's the first phase right there. Isn't that interesting how it all begins to come together? Once again, major in this case is vertical, minor axis horizontal, right back to CVP. If I were to add another cube in here, let's do this. If I can bake in, I'll probably cloud up the issue. Oh, let's do this. I did a mini version. Now I'm going to stop right there. We'll go back to the second page. It kind of illustrates it. But hey, Chip, how are you, man? Good to have you on board. How you been? Good? Outstanding. I hope you're doing well. Today's lesson, again, for the purposes of review, we're looking at advanced perspective, but more specifically, one area in advanced perspective that's extremely a dilemma, and that's how to work with circles of perspective. Very complicated, and I think it's a very valuable lesson, especially for me, because the more you work with organic shape, yeah, it's Friday after all. Yeah, thank God it is. You're right. The more you work with organic shape or compound form, the more difficult it is to see it working accurately. And I think that's one of the things that's really critical. So I went back to square one in the advanced program here today, this first lesson, to put the real system together on the mechanics of how it all begins to function. Now I know, again, it's all perspective, and there's a lot of things that we've discussed in the past that begin to play into this. But I think at the end of the day, my mission here today is to make sure we understand that circles are a product of the face of a cube. There are majors and minor axes that all begins to work together for us here. Again, major axis, minor axis, all the way through. So here we go. There's page one. There's another sheet here. Let's go back and begin to use this as a little bit more fodder for. Let's do this. Let's do a double face here. Let's come back in. Pardon my hands here. Here's a leading edge. We're going to go to a 2-point system here. Leading edge, back to a drive line, back to a drive line. Rotate this out. I'm going to put two faces together on the face of two faces of a cube, the right and the left-hand side. Let's get back in here. Let's kind of visualize where that is, and let's visualize where that is. There are my two cubes right there, two faces. All set? There we are. Let me just rotate this in a bit more. There we are. That's that one. My leading edge. There. And now there. Now, let's get back into the basics. First thing I want to do is this. Once I develop this, find my perspective center. Diagonal. Diagonal. Since I'm here, diagonal, and again, rotate, diagonal. What that helps me find is my perspective center, there and there. That's the perspective center of the face of that cube. Next step, I'm going to come back in and begin to develop what is known as the minor axis, which is going to go back to VP. There's my minor. And in this case, there's my minor. I'll go back to major, come back up and go vertical, major axis, and again, major axis. There it is. Again, in this case, major is vertical, minor back to vanishing point right, minor back to vanishing point left. So let's get this squared away. There's a contact, 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 contact. On the left-hand face, contact, 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 contact. Let's put those circles in place, knowing full well that the rotation, if you missed it, the rotation developing around form should go as following. If you're right-handed, counterclockwise into the contact points. If you're left-handed, you go clockwise into that process. Keeps the shoulder loose and really develops a lot of accuracy. Let's go to phase one. See it? See it? Strike it in there. There's that first circle. Isn't that cool? There it is. From the right-hand side. Now the other side. Notice again, both of those circles, they're standing upright because of that contact right there. That's the critical point on the ground plane right there. That tells you where you need to be. And it keeps it from looking like it's falling over or it's distorted. Let me stop there just for a moment. Kind of get your feedback on this. How is this coming together for you? Am I communicating all right? Super. So far, so good. Yeah, very good. Excellent. Okay, thanks, guys. How about you, Nemo? We good? Hey, super. All right, very good, gang. Let's go back in. Let's put. We've done the right hand face and now a left hand face, but let's go top and bottom. See how this begins to change a bit here. So let's develop a 2-point cube again and do the following here. I'm going to come back into leading edge. Put a drive line in place, off to the right-hand side, and again, off to the left-hand side, draw through it. Pick a point of reference. There's the face of the cube there, and there's the face of the cube there. Just visualizing what that cube is going to look like. So let's go to rotate this back in space. Let's rotate this back. Now, unlike the other exercises where they're on the face, let's put one on the ground plane and one up on the top. Let's see how that changes here. Once again, draw through it, and again, drop into it. There it is. There's a transparent, almost like a glass cube. But why do you need to find the major and minor axis to draw these circles? Very good question, Chip. You need to find the major and minor axes, which is now the major axis is vertical and the minor axis is horizontal. What that helps you do is keep the circle proper and standing up or laying down when you begin to develop a shape. Without that knowledge, you could be tilting them, twisting them, and distorting them. So I hope that really helps to clarify the question. Does that make sense or not? I'll just wait for your response here. Yeah, excellent. That's good. It's a bit of a complication, but it's part of the whole process of understanding. When I go through a drawing process, for example, I'm always conscious of the mechanics of how things work. Now, I don't know it all. I never will. When I get into round forms or complicated shapes like vehicle design, I'm always conscious of this major and minor thing. Because if you're not watching that, for example, all of a sudden you begin to rotate these guys and they look like they're falling off or tilting over. That's why it's so important to understand why the major and minor axis works the way we are. And today, just for your benefit too, gang, this is more of a how-to mechanical side, but on Tuesday we'll get into more of the illustration side of how it all begins to function. So you'll see it much more clearly. So we all set here, gang? Let's move on here. Now that I have that, then we're going to go up on top and bottom. Let's find the perspective center of the floor first. Red pen, draw through it. Crossover, there's my perspective center right there. Let's go to the top. Crossover, crossover. There's my perspective center at the top. Now let's do this. Let's find that the minor axis. That minor axis is going right back. In this case, notice that goes right back to vanishing point right. This one now, my major axis is going to do this. This is my major axis. Now in the case on the ground plane, notice how the minor goes back to vanishing point right, and the major goes back to vanishing point left. How do I know that? Because again, remember the vertical face right here. There's my major axis on the vertical face. When I drop through the surface, that has to go right back into VP. Here, it's going vertically. No VP, right or left. It's vertical. Oh, after some time, you start seeing those axes without having to actually draw them. Yeah, that's exactly right, Demo. We're going through this to see how it all begins to function. And once we begin to understand it, you can start to know where the axes are. It makes perfect sense. And how do I snap them? Yep, absolutely. You got it. Here we go. So there it is. There's my contact, 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 and contact. Are we ready? On the ground plane. Now connect the dots. There's my circle on the ground. Now I'm going to go back up on top. Major axis over the top, back to vanishing point left again, and again, minor axis, vanishing point right. Contact point, there, 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 and there. Now watch what happens. Rotate it in. And there's my upper and lower. We know we're good. If I connect the dots, I get this cylinder that should fall right into place. And there it is. Look at that, gang. There I am. Isn't that cool? There she is. So that's a great point, Nemo. You got it right on the money here. Super. Let's go back and again, let's do another variation. Now this is 2 point. Now what happens in 1 point when we do this? Let's go back and begin to create that guy. Let's get a vertical in here. Let's run this through. Get that front face in place. And get this into place. Drive that back in perspective. Drive that back in perspective. And begin to look at. There it is. Very slim here, but that's good. It's very extreme, but that's a good exercise to work with. There's my cube. I'm going to draw through this guy again. Drive that back in perspective, and let's just stop this down. There's my transparent cube right there, but this is in 1 point perspective because this face is parallel to me. These are rotated because they're in 2 point perspective. So let's go back and get the exercise down. Let's do this. Let's find the perspective center. Let's go to the top first. Now you'll notice, in this case, there's my perspective center. Down at the bottom, the base, the floor, it's there, there, and there's my perspective center there. Notice the difference here. Once again, you'll find out. Now, the major axis is going to do this. There's my major axis. Once I find the perspective center, I'm going to come right back to it, going back to VP. That major axis now is going back to my central vanishing point because it's in 1 point perspective. Now, let me show you how that works. There's my vertical. There's a major on the front face. It follows over and goes right through. Now, the minor will do the same thing. It goes right through to there. This is now my major axis on the floor, major axis on the top. Now notice that now the minor axis is going to remain parallel to the horizon line. It's going to do this: minor to minor. Contact, 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 contact. Let's get them all out of the way at once. Contact, contact, and contact. Notice up on top, circle. Down below, circle. And one of the great mysteries, and especially in perspective, notice in most cases, even in 2 point perspective, look how the upper, pardon me, let me move this in. Look how the upper circle is very tight and the lower circle opens up. That's the phenomenon of perspective. Now, let me give you a real quick analogy here. And during transportation design, especially, a lot of individuals will draw the front right wheel very full and repeat the rear tire the same way. That does not happen in perspective. It happens like this. If I rotate the other way, look at this, how that whole thing begins to collapse. Fuller, rearward. It begins to minimize. So we'll go into those exercises a bit more on Tuesday, how that begins to function. But again, notice this, very, very slim, very much open. And that's the real phenomenon of perspective. That's why perspective, I remember Sid Mead making a comment that I'll never forget, and it's so true as time moves on. Perspective is the genesis of illustration. I've said it before in some streams, and I'll say it again. If we do not understand perspective, how to work with it, how to develop line, form, shape, the geometry of it all, it'll absolutely come back and murder us. If you understand it, then you can begin to modify it and begin to flatter it and work with it. So it's really critical here. So hope I'm not making a big case out of this, gang. But I want to make sure, notice how that the conditions are all the same, but some of the ground rules or parameters will shift a little bit here, especially when you go from 2 point into 1 point. 2 point, the major is vertical. In 1 point, it goes right back to the vanishing point, in this case, central vanishing point. Let's go back to a 2 point exercise here. Let's move right along. Let's get this vertical down. Let's get my leading edge in place. Let's do this and cut this back. Now let's get a drive line in place. Get a drive line in place. I'm going to just almost like a cylinder. Let's extend this just a bit. Let's get the frame in place here. Let's drive that back. And then there we are. There's my upper plane. I'm going to come back in here, get this vertical in, draw through it. Draw through it, get this edge here, there I am, and there I am. Now, same process. Look what begins to happen here. This is going to be a classic example now of going from 1 point back to 2 point. And let's see, if you don't get perspective and geometry, you end up with that. Yeah, you do. Very much of an you become Picasso in an instant, which isn't bad. He made a few million in his lifetime. So here we go. Now that I have that face, let me just make sure we get this a little more accurate. Let's kind of stand this up a bit more. There we are. Now, let's find the perspective center. There, rotate, there. Now that I've got that, back here. What I want you to notice in this exercise is the following. This is going to be a good example of how the front circle will be a little tighter, and the rear circle is going to open up because it's further away from where you're standing. So here we go. Let's go back. There's my perspective center there. And there. Now let's get the drive lines in. Here's my minor axis, back to VP. My major axis, standing upright. So there's my contact, 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 and contact. Same thing here. Notice. Look how those two lines collapse. Look how that line's going forward and right back to VP. Just going right back to vanishing point. Again, major axis, vertical. Right here, contact, contact, contact. Look at the difference here as opposed to here. It begins to minimize and opens up as I go rearward. Aquarium, hello, yeah, that's good. Here we go. Now we're going to create the circles. I'm going to rotate out of this, come back in through here, right hand, counterclockwise, rotate. There's one, and notice, there's two. Look how that back circle really has opened up. And again, especially in transportation design, that is so critical. Near side tire, far side tire will always open up, no matter what the view is, no matter if you tighten it down or open it up. So let's do this. Let's check the geometry up. There's my axle. Good. There's my baseline, and there's my baseline right there. Boy, that falls right into place. Nicely handled. What do you think, gang? So far, so good? Am I communicating all right? Well, there's phase. There's page 2. Let me just hold on for a moment here and get some feedback from you. My big concern is this helping? Is it beginning to make sense? Good, good, good. Thank you, Chip. What do you think, Captain Nemo? Super. How about you, Ballistic? You still with us? Appreciate your time here, guys. This is really cool. Good exercise on refreshing certain things and getting things done. So let's do this. Go back in. Hey, very good. Excellent. Thank you, Ballistic. Let's rotate down on that one. Let's finish up with a series of plates here. What if we modify some of the things? What if we change some of the ground rules and get a little more flamboyant with it? Let's do this. What if I come back in and create a ground plane first? And I just put an abstract shape down, a 2-point perspective. How do I know in 2-point perspective? That's what that's doing, because notice, those lines are not parallel. That just rotated the box a little bit. So now that I've got that in place, let's go back and do this. Go back and create almost like a parallelepiped, where I come back and through here, and through here, and then again through here. I'm really going to slant this thing back. Pick the upper. Again, draw through it. I've just taken that, almost developed it like a parallelepiped. I really rotated this thing over. It's not vertical now, it really slants. Now watch what happens. Same process. No matter what happens here. Perspective center. Perspective center. There it is there. Up on top. Find the center. Run across. There's my perspective center. Now, notice this. Major axis. Right back to vanishing point. In this case, vanishing point right. Vanishing point right. So I've got a contact there, 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 and there. Now, minor axis. Right back to vanishing point left. Again, same thing through here. Vanishing point. Draw through it. Contact, contact. I'm beginning to set up this parallelepiped by really rotating this thing out. So once again, well, making sense, game? I'm going to correct myself here, pardon me. This now becomes my major axis. This now becomes my major axis, minor axis. So pardon me, just reverse the whole thing. I'm sorry. All set, gang? Now we're going to rotate the circles. Everybody. Notice how tight this thing's going to get. There's the upper, and there's the lower. Look how that whole thing got really condensed from there to there. Huge how narrow this is and how really open up that lower is. We connect the dots very quickly. See how accurate we are. There it is there, and there it is there. There's that really obtuse angled piece, correctly drawn, knowing how we put those pieces together in the horizontals and the verticals. So let's go back and do a what now? That's 2-point perspective. Let's change the shape and go into 1-point perspective. Let's try this. Let's get this facing flames in. And let's come back in there and begin to pick up, let's see, how are we going to do this? I'm going to come back in. Yeah, let's pick up a nice cube here. Let's do this. This, drive line. Let's come back and I'm going to truncate this thing. Let's do this. Let's just kind of change the shape just a bit, but it's still going to work the same way. I'm going to pick a spot of reference here. I'm going to draw through this guy. Draw through this guy. Get those things to work. Pick a spot of reference back here. There's my base. Base of the cube. Here's my upper. Right there. There I am. So everybody with me on that one? I just truncated the whole thing. Now let's do back and do this. Let's come back in and find the perspective center. And again, the perspective center. There it is there. And again, up on top, since it's a lot narrower, same thing. There's my perspective center. Now, let's get the drive lines in place. Minor axis, cross parallel, minor axis, major axis. Here's my central vanishing point right here. That goes right back to CVP. And again, right back to CVP. There it is. Major, major, contact, and so on. Contact, pardon me, contact. Now, circle down below. There we go. And there's 1. And there's 2. There I am. Look how that thing begins to truncate nicely. Now let's go back in and just connect the dots. There it is there, and there it is there. Almost conical in the form, but that's it. Very cool. And that's standing up. Let's go to a 2-point system here and show you what happens when you lay that thing down. Reference. The reference. Draw through it. And pick up, let's maybe double this thing up a little bit. Let's get this backside face in here. Let's draw that through. Let's draw that through in perspective. Let's get that backside transparency in place. We're going to build these shapes as we go here. Now, very interesting. I'm going to show you a little trick here, how to truncate this thing. So now that you have that, let's find the perspective center. Again, diagonal, diagonal, center line. Again, through here. And there I am. Perspective center. But I want to change gears. I want to be really full here. There's my vertical. Let's do the major, pardon me, major axis. And again, minor axis. Minor axis in this case is going back to the vanishing point, left-hand side. But I want to change the ground rules here. I want to reduce this front cone. So I'm going to pick a point there, 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 and there. And I want to just let's frame this in. Let's go back in through here. Let's get this major and minor. There's my major all the way through. There's my minor all the way through. Now I'm going to connect the dots here. I'm going to come back and say I want that face right there. I want to really reduce it to that. So there's my front side very full, rear side tapered. So far so good, gang, with me? I've just picked a point of reference. It could be out here. I reduced, instead of being a full circle back there, I just picked a point of reference and reduced the size of that circle back there. So now it's going to look like this. I'm going to come back in here, rotate that place. There's my circle up back. There's my circle up front. Now when I connect the dots, there's that shape laying down. All set, gang? How are we doing there? Good? You got a funnel. Exactly correct. That's a funnel. You got it. Super. Now, again, notice how this circle, again, standing upright, even though it's off the ground a little bit, but that's all right. So let's go back into here. Let's pick some of this same point of reference in one-point perspective. Let's do this. Back to vanishing point. Back to vanishing point. Let's get that in place. Let's pick up that face right here. Let's take that back and do the same thing here. Draw through it. Draw through it. Draw through it again. There's my transparency right there. That's what I want to look for. No problem. Helping, gang? Super. Now again, I want to do the same thing here. I want to come back and find a perspective center back here and back here. And I'm going to come back in through here, find a perspective center. Perspective center. Now, ready? Here's my major axis. But again, I'm going to change the rules here. There's my minor axis. I'm going to come back in and create an area this big. I just picked a random rectangle or square right there. That's what I want to work with. So now this becomes my major. This now becomes my minor. I'm going to take that first pass and do this. There's my circle right there, looking right at me. There I am. So far, so good, gang. I'm going to come back in there. I'm going to split this thing. Now let's pick a random point right here. Come back into this, draw through there, and create that. But I want to come back and pick up the center in here. Second one, right through here. Major axis is there. Minor axis is there. Big circle. 2 and 3. Connect the dots. And there you are. Almost like a flask light, just laying it down, getting a drink. Be right back. All right. What do you think there, guys? Making sense so far? I mean, it's a very, very, very definite, yeah, it's a bottle form. You've got that right. You're absolutely correct. There's a very definitive set of circumstances here that, again, I want to really go back and review these guys. Let's go back and start with what we did here. We came up out of the blocks with this form right here. We came out of the blocks with this. There we are. That's the basic formula right there. Face of a cube, major axis, in this case, very simplified, minor axis horizontal. And in the one-point perspective, using the whole process with the major, or the minor and the major in place, and then rotating into it with an awful lot of what we're dealing with in terms of collapsing this form or getting the rotation to go right. Same thing in a 1-point perspective here. Now we change gears to 2-point. Notice the vertical one, notice the major stands up and the minor goes right back to CVP. Look at this one on the floor here. Interesting. This one on the floor, the major axis now goes back to vanishing point left. Why? Because it's laying down now. That's exactly what has to happen. If the major on the front face is here, it just follows throughout the entire pattern that remains in that direction. Same with now in the second phase. We just did a series of let's focus in on these things. Notice again how in the case of the major axis standing up, minor axis back to VP, back to VP. Same thing here, back in the 2-point perspective. Now in this case, we went back vertically. Now the minor axis is here and the major axis is there. We just follow that shape right through. If I were to draw through the entire form, every one of those lines, that box in there represents the major axis. Same process here and here, going through it all. And then the last one, we just took a little more adventuresome task of changing the shape a little bit, but yet using the same geometry, how to shrink things, how to expand certain things, and how to taper certain things, using the same process of understanding how to work the major axis, how to work the minor axis, and then last but not least, keeping the counterclockwise of your right-handed rotation from the shoulder. So that frees up your drawing skill here. It's drawing set. Let's try something else. I just want to demonstrate for what it's worth. If I have a drive line in place here, let's put a drive line down. Let's show how this works. I'll put a frame of reference in here. First thing I want to do is set up this. I'm going to come back in through here that we've done. Let's go back to this. Let's do this. Notice how that works. There's a very full setup. If I drive that line back in perspective here, there it is. Now if I come forward to here, look at this. Look how that diminishes. Helping, gang? Notice, very full. Let's box this in. What we're working with here. Here's the face of the cube. Here's the face of the cube. Look how it diminished. Let's find our perspective center. There it is there. Just connect the dots. Drive right through it. Now say I want to come over, for example, a certain distance. I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to draw through this guy and pick a point of reference here. I want you to notice this. This is really critical. Look how pretty tight that one is and how extremely tight this one is. Now if I come over here, I'm going to round that beauty out. Look how much that circle opens up. What do you think, gang? Making sense? Hey, Chip, are you back? That's great. I hope this is helping, gang. I really do. This is not an easy thing to go through, so thank you for your patience above all else. Looking good? Oh, you got chocolate too? Man, sounds okay, very good. Notice, we just pointed out a reference early on in some of the exercises. For example, this exercise here, we made a big point out of the fact that that near side circle is full. But as you go back, look how it opens up. Now, when you put this into product application, look what happens here. Again, we have this, and all of a sudden you go the other way. Let's put that into place. Draw through it. This also is the face of a cube, going back to the same set of drive lines. There's my far side tire, for example. We're drawing an automobile here. That's my far side tire. Look what's happening here. Now, let's come back in and begin to put something together. Let's use a black pen. I'm putting drive lines in place. You with me, guys? There you go. What do you think, gang? What do you think? See how that works? Go back to your question earlier, Chip, about how the whole thing begins to function. That's why this major and minor, let's do this. I'm going to screw this sketch up here. That's why that major axis and minor axis is so critical. Notice how, again, that contact point is critical. Critical. Let's go back in and just put some heat in this thing. These are the circles we're working with today. Notice that contact points on the ground, If you don't understand that geometry right there, those those points of reference are really critical. In fact, it might be kind of helpful here. Let's just do this. It really becomes much more critical too. You start to put together what I refer to as some little concept sketch rendering. Look at that happens. When you understand how perspective works, this is how we advance it. Look at this. You can kind of start to put some tone in here and really begin to take advantage of what the shapes are doing. Pardon my silence here, guys. I just want to give you some oversight as to what happens. I'll wrap this up in a moment here. So thanks again for your patience. Look what begins to happen here. It begins to happen when you understand what the geometry does. All of a sudden, now maybe it's just me, but I think I really have to state this with a lot of confidence here, folks. It just, you want a chocolate? If you understand the geometry, now, maybe I'm the odd man out here, but I'm firmly convinced that the more you understand the geometry, the more confident you are in finishing off the rest of the form, because you know it's right. You know it's correct. And there's nothing greater than to understand that phenomenon. Let me just finish off here just a bit here. Sorry for boring you to death here, guys. I just want to share with the application what's coming in next week. And there you go. Quick little study. Look how simple that is. Are you with me, guys? Hope, hope, hope. And there it is. It's just fun to do. It's just incredibly, to me, inspiring how the whole process of how the mechanics begin to dictate what you see and how it's done. Simply awesome. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, guys, you've been very kind here. I hope this has been helpful to you. But let me just do this, too. For what it's worth, let's get into some compound shape, just for what it's worth. Let's get a ballpoint pen. Let's do this. Even if I have surfaces that are very complicated. Look how those circles help me dictate those shapes. Love the back of it. Now, all right. Look what happens. I mean, again, Nemo made a point earlier. Once you get this geometry down and understand what all this, you can just kind of visualize where these things go. Now, look what happens here. Notice how this is tighter, opens up. Tighter, opens up. You put a little bit of surface into this thing, look what begins to happen. If you just come back in and just put a little bit of surface here, you've got this. Adding line weight. Maybe one side's negative. Look how that opens up the entire concept of putting things together here. Ready, gang? The more organic it gets, and the more fun it is. I mean, again, you can go back in through here, same process. There you go, gang. I mean, look how quickly that all comes together. What do you think? So far, so good? I mean, I just wanted to take a step further here. We're going to do more of this on next week when I begin into part 2 of this whole lesson about circles. But that whole process, pardon me again for bringing this back up front, that sheet right there tells me everything I need to know about building confidence. I really hope this has been of help to you guys. You've been very, very patient to hang on here for the period of time you have had. But again, notice this material right here is, to me, the real secret to graphic design and illustration success. You can't do anything without understanding how the whole mechanical side of the whole process works. And I know I spent a lot of time today going through a lot of mechanical verbiage and so forth, and I apologize for that. But it's necessary to get into that to understand how to begin to build that empire. And once again, I'll go back again to one of those great lines. It's the perspective, to me, is the genesis of illustration. It all comes together. All begins to match. And again, because of that system right there, little things like that begin to open up the avenues and the floodgates of creativity. This process allows me to become much more confident when I do little things like this. It's just amazing how it begins to function. Let's see. Yeah, it's impressive how quickly you draw a car. You should be a designer. Yeah, you know what? I tried that, Chip, and look what it did to me, man. My teeth are crooked. I'm going bald. My hair is gray. It just killed me. So I gave it up for that reason. That's a funny line. But I am grateful for the experience I had at General Motors design staff. I still have great friends there. We still stay in touch. It's just been a real blessing for me. So, but not as much as working with you guys. I mean, this has really been terrific for me. So, again, how do you begin to qualify this? And let me close with this. And I think this is something that's really critical. This whole lesson today, we're going to pick it up on Tuesday. And by the way, I'll announce that in a moment here. What really is interesting, just interesting. Let's see, easy to draw a few circles and then draw them. Yeah, that's it. That's how it happens. And you're doing the same thing, Nemo. Designer turned you into a tree killer. Yeah, like I said last night in Shadow Stream, I think I probably destroyed more trees in my lifetime I can shake a stick at. But there's still magic in that. I mean, I like the digital phenomenon, but there's something really interesting about the drawing phenomenon that will never go out of style. So I know you guys are going to be in the same boat here, and you're going to take it ad infinitum in your lifetime with the careers you've got in front of you. But I do think it's really critical that this is one important lesson behind the scenes here I want to get across before we end the stream today. Why is this so critical? Here's why it's so critical. Bottom line is this. What we continue to resist will continue to persist. Think about that. Just for a moment, analyze that. What we continue to resist will continue to persist. In other words, if we don't make adjustments, if we don't make changes, we don't understand how mechanics work and how things begin to factor into being successful on paper, it's interesting how that whole idea, the more we resist it, the more it's going to resist. Now, when you break through, when you begin to see it and understand it, all of a sudden the resistance is gone. And what are you persisting on now? You persist now on tremendous quality work because you have no resistance. You understand the process. And believe me, let me rephrase that. I do not understand the process. I've been blessed to do some neat things, and I've gone through some interesting circumstances in my career, working with some tremendous talent over the course of time. But I'm still enamored with the fact that I've got so much to learn. You're listening to the most ignorant guy in the room. I'm still learning, just like you are. It's amazing to me how it all up because I've learned how to not resist change. I don't want to persist in it. I want to get rid of it. So all that to say, gang, I hope this has been helpful here. I hope this I jumped ahead here with this page here. I hope it didn't intimidate you at all. And let me rephrase that. I hope it didn't take us away from the basic drift of today's lesson. Let's get the mechanics down. I'm going to come back in on Tuesday of next week, and we're going to go back in and review some of this stuff and go into more product work like this and take it a little further. And on that note, let me just make a couple of announcements. Unless you've got anybody have any questions or concerns here, guys, before I kind of wrap it up a little bit here. And by the way, again, thank you so much for your patience. It's just great to work with you guys. Any commentary at all? Yays and nays? No question? Super. Hey, Linear, how are you, man? Good to have you on board here. The reason I asked that, the questions throughout the whole process here, there are so many things to discuss. I want to make sure we go from step to step to step, and it begins to make sense for you. It's still a mystery to me. I still work with it every day, and it still amazes me how it all comes together. I like you. I'm still practicing. So, and I hope that till the day I die, in fact, you know, I've got my tombstone already figured out. Man, I told my wife, this is the greatest line in the world. My tombstone will read as follows. It's not much of a plot, but it had James D. Orr Jr. in it. How cool is that? Or maybe I should change it to Dr. Contrast. I don't know, but I think that'd be kind of neat. So let me make a couple of announcements here, folks. But before I make the announcement, I really would want to stress this, and please, I'm not trying to be self-serving here, but I would really appreciate you passing the word about my streams on Monday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, next week. I'm going to rebuild my audience. So if you'd be kind enough to pass along the word to your friends and influencers and so forth you work with, I'd love to see them come on board with us. I say that not because of being selfish. I just want to make a difference in other people's individual life in terms of being able to generate great, quick work here and have no doubt about the confidence in what you're working with. So as I always state, if I say something wrong here or do something wrong, tell me. If I do something right, tell me. I'm looking forward to really building this whole audience and this whole community to become really drop dead awesome. So with that thought in mind, next week, for example, rather than going Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I think I've made the decision here with some good input from some good friends like the Shadow Man and you all. I'm going to pick up this lesson on part 2 on Tuesday at 1:30. So my next the schedule is going to shift like the following. It'll go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesday at 1:30, Wednesday from 4 to 5 again, and then Thursday from 1:30 to 2:30. That way, being consistent day to day to day, I can say, hey, see you tomorrow instead of waiting a day so we can get some things done here. So once again, gang, great fun today. This is a terrific subject matter. It really is interesting how it all comes together. And I want to hopefully that'll be a benefit to you. And for everybody's benefit, I just had a meeting this afternoon with our publication guy. The book we're putting together on basic drawing skills is almost there. So we'll keep you posted on that one. It's be coming on my website very soon. We'll also be building some more print work and doing some things on my website. If you go to my website recently here, we're adding a new store, which will have some of my print work on it for purchase, some automobile work, aircraft work, just a variety of things to look at here. So we're building on that as well. So thank you very much. I'll start pushing your stream harder, XD, and I'll say thank you very much, Linda. I really appreciate it. And to all of you, again, thank you so much for being patient today. It means an awful lot to me to have you guys on board. I respect you tremendously. All of you have been very good, and your commentary has been terrific. Let's keep it up and let's keep the community going here, gang. And last but not least, please visit my website at drcontrast.com for basic drawing skills. We'll keep you posted on things coming up. It's going to be exciting next few months here as we go. And last but not least, I always finish off because I think this is absolutely critical. Always remember to never forget to dare to be great, because you are. Thanks very much, gang. Have a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 1:30, where we'll pick up part 2 on this thing, on advanced perspective. All the best, and let's go get them. Thank you.